If you feel like watches have suddenly become unaffordable, you are not imagining it. Lately, a lot of watch YouTubers have said prices are out of control, quality is down, and the industry is in decline.
Every single brand is raising their retail prices to the moon.
As long as the product I'm receiving is in line with the price, and I think increasingly less people are finding that to be the case.
I think those diagnoses are wrong, but the feeling behind it isn't. So why does it feel like everything's out of reach? And that's what we need to talk about. Let's dive in. First claim that I've been hearing a lot: the Swiss watch market is in decline. In the year 2000, the value of global Swiss watch exports was 10 billion Swiss francs. In 2024, it was 24.5 billion Swiss francs. That's 25 years of consistent growth. The luxury watch industry is very susceptible to how the overall economy is going. So it's going to go up in some years and down in others, but that can't by default be interpreted as a decline. In 2015, they saw a big decline, and in 2024, we also saw a decline of 2%. In 2025, we're likely going to see a decline of 2 to 3%. This is a reflection of an industry that came out of a massive consumer overspending bubble, and then at the tail end got hit by tariffs, a soft Chinese economy, and consumers who couldn't keep up with inflation. In terms of revenue, this softening isn't much bigger than the fact that 2025 revenue is still going to be higher than 2022 revenues. What has, in real terms, been declining is the overall volume of Swiss and luxury watches in general. That decline has come from a massive decline of low-priced, high-volume watches and been replaced by low volumes of much higher-priced watches. In 2000, the Swiss watch industry exported 22 million watches that sold for under 200 Swiss francs. Today, that number is less than 8 million. In the same period, watches priced above 3,000 Swiss francs has gone up from 488,000 watches to over 2 million watches. In the year 2000, the average price of the Swiss watch being bought was 312 Swiss francs. Today, it's 1,618 francs. That basically means that over this 24-year period, the average price of the sold watches have increased by 7% per year every year. And this is a combination of price increases, but mostly people just buying fewer but much more expensive watches. The second claim I want to address is that watch quality is declining. And in broad, measurable terms, that's simply not true. When it comes to manufacturing quality, like tolerances, machining, reliability, baseline finishing, watches today are better than they've ever been. The reason is simple. Modern manufacturing processes are vastly more capable and more accessible than they were 20 or 30 years ago. What used to require exceptional skill or enormous cost is now repeatable at scale. You can see this clearly in the lower price segments. Features like solid bracelets, quick release systems, and on-the-fly micro adjustments are now common on watches costing a few $100s. 25 years ago, those same features were rare even on watches costing well over $1,000. That doesn't mean that brands never optimize for cost. Some entry-level movements use synthetic components, and some manufacturers replace movements rather than service them. But those decisions are usually about efficiency and turnaround time, and not because the movements themselves are unreliable or poorly made. There have also been isolated cases of high-end brands pushing optimization too far, particularly on entry models. But those cases stand out precisely because they're the exceptions, not the rule. Quality is also high because of transparency. The watch industry has never been more visible. If a brand releases a watch with poor finishing or obvious quality issues, it will be photographed, it will be magnified, and it will be discussed online almost immediately. At the same time, strong, low-end value brands put real pressure on the rest of the market. When a watch at a lower price point offers excellent finishing or best-in-class bracelets, it raises expectations across the board. Taken together, better manufacturing, intense competition, and near total transparency, the overall direction is clear. Across most price segments, watch quality continues to improve and not decline. I know that at least 1/3 of you are new to my channel and are not subscribed. If you are one of those people, please click the subscribe button. It means you will be kept up to date on what goes on my channel, and I will also know that I'm doing something good because it's a way of signaling to me that I am worth watching. So if you like somebody that talks about watches, is unbiased and in nobody's pocket, and just in general loves watches, this is the place for you to be. Subscribe. Thanks a ton. What about the claim that watch brands are blindly raising prices? First of all, it's entirely true that especially around COVID, brands saw a window to increase prices quite aggressively. Some did so much more than others, like JLC. The biggest and most unreasonable price increases came from watch brands from 2021 to 2023. This was where some brands thought the sky was the limit. This was when brands thought people were willing to pay pretty much anything for a watch. And in all honesty, we were. For the most part, people accepted it. But since 2024, this trend has been put on pause. Rolex and Tudor just had their prices for 2026 leaked. And we know the following. Rolex raised prices 3 times in 2025. Average prices of Rolexes in January 2026 are going to be between 10 and 20% higher than December 2023 prices. Tudor have raised prices between 4 and 9%. How is that not predatory behavior? Well, Rolex is raising prices of gold watches by around 9% in a year where the cost of gold has increased by 55%. For their steel models, the increases are around 5%, but that's 5% that has to cover inflation of 2025, which is 2.9, plus a 15% tariff that Rolex hadn't factored into their prices yet. Tudor has 4% for steel. That's 1.1% above inflation. And considering that they also have to factor in tariffs, the increase, even when you take in other 2025 increases at the beginning of the year, it's quite moderate. And for comparison, the average price of a new home in New York went up by 6.9% in 2025. The price of eggs went up 41%. Those Rolex and Tudor numbers are in the low end. The price increases that have come through in 2025 and early 2026 are largely just inflationary and tariff adjustments. But then I thought, hey, I've got an Excel sheet. 25 years of data on the watches I've bought and the watches I've considered buying. Yes, whenever I consider a watch, I put it into the Excel sheet and list what price is it, where's it being sold, what is the retail price, and what can I get it on the secondary market, and then I follow it for a piece of time. Weird, I know, but this is something I do. I know for somewhere around 300 watches, no, I don't own 300 watches, but I've considered 300 watches. I know what their retail price was when I either bought them or when I was looking at them, and I can look up that price and I can look up their retail price now. And it actually kind of shocked me. Here are just some of the examples. Glashütte Original, an unchanged price for 3 years for 4 watches I've been looking at. Nomos, over a 12-year period of time, 13 different watches, 2% per year in increase. Casio, 10 years, 10 watches, 3.3% on average. For Rolex, the average price increase all the way back to 2014 for the watches I have considered or owned, 3.5% per year on average. It's slightly higher than inflation for the period, but we're talking about decimals. Tudor, 3.5 for 11 years. IWC, 4% per year for 4 years. And the biggest jumps, a little bit surprising maybe, but Seiko at 5% over 10 years. Omega, 5% over 13 years. JLC, 5% over 10 years. Zenith, 6% over 5 years. Doxa, 6% over 4 years. And the biggest ones of them all, AP, Parmigiani, Patek, Vacheron, 11% or more over 6 years. This is just a small sample, but the data tracks what I kind of already had a hunch about. The majority of brands have kept their prices relatively stable or near or around inflation for their entry models. There are a few brands that have noticeably moved upmarket. It's JLC, it's Seiko, it's Omega, it's Zenith, it's AP, it's Patek, it's Parmigiani. Those brands that have moved upmarket are super interesting because they can basically be divided into 2 camps. There's AP, Patek, and the other high ends. They've just bumped prices to what to me feels like astronomical levels. I don't have the numbers for Ulysse Nardin or Moser or Lange, but my guess is that the same applies to them. The second group is Omega, JLC, Seiko, Zenith. Omega, clearly going upmarket. The Omega Speedmaster has on average become 7% more expensive every single year since I bought mine 10 years ago. Seiko, everybody knows they've been premiumizing. They've been pushing less of the lower end models and pivoting instead to the Presage and Pro Specs lineup. And JLC, yes, we all know this. My data lines up with what we already know. They jacked up prices big time around COVID. Zenith, done more or less the same. But Tudor, Rolex, Nomos, Longines, Panerai, Casio, Glashütte have more or less maintained their relative position in the market. The data just shows, for me, more nuance. It's simply not true that all brands have just been blindly raising prices. It's also not true that it's continuing. They've almost all slowed down drastically. So when Nico says the price increases are out of control, it's just not true. But it leaves me with a mystery, a conundrum, a question. Because my guess is that you guys watching this video are thinking, okay, Mike, fine, I buy your numbers, but why does it feel to me like they've gotten so much more expensive? Why is there such a mismatch in the data and the perceived reality? Well, it's down to two things. One thing that has nothing to do with watches, and another thing that has everything to do with making money as a watch brand. I'm going to keep it simple, really simple. I'm making the case that a lot of watch brands, not all, have more or less increased prices in line with inflation or thereabouts. Now remember, inflation is an average and some things increase more or less. Eggs, remember, 41% in a year is part of the average 2.9% for all products. Over the last 10 years, the average inflation in the United States has been 2.5%. The average price of a car has increased 3.5% in that period of time. What has the average increase in the last 10 years been to buy a house? 7.4. And what has the average American salary increased by on average in the same period? 3%. The simple fact is, when you look at how the average middle income person's economy has developed over the last 10 years, your salary has gone up. Coffee and takeout has gotten cheaper, but big ticket items like houses, cars, and utilities have gone up so much that your disposable fun income has shrunk. Most regular people have less cash to spend on shiny things, especially post-COVID, where the biggest jumps in inflation kicked in. Well, that's the first part. Now the second part. You didn't get a 14 to 20% salary increase last year, not as a group. One or two of you might have, but most of you got 2, 3%, some of you got nothing. In my day job, I've got access to these stats, and on average, most Americans barely eked out a 4% increase last year. To you, a 15% inflation and tariff adjustment coupled with only a 4% salary increase puts these products even further out of your grasp. And it's not just you. In the US, the top 10% of wealthy people hold 2/3 of all wealth in the economy. Wealth has primarily accumulated at the very top. Today's youngest generation is the first generation in recorded history that is not expected to have a better standard of living than the generations that came before them. The key reason you feel that watches have become more expensive is because yours and my wealth and income has not kept up to be able to afford these kinds of luxury items. And brands do know this, and it does affect how they do business. But most of them have gone about it in a much less ham-fisted way than JLC did. It's about upselling and whale economies. And we're going to start with whale economies. How does EA Sports make money on games like FIFA? Who buys all those battle passes and loot boxes? Whales. Small groups of people that spend ridiculous amounts of money. Small groups of people who make up massive revenue streams. Most people don't buy those battle passes, but the ones that do, they buy everything. These individuals are massively profitable, and in a world with 8 billion people, there are more than enough of them. The same goes with Lego collector's sets. Those, the ones that are clearly targeted at grown-ups. The real money is in a relatively small group of collectors that buy so much Lego that it will make your head spin. The people that get access to a Hermes Birkin bag have spent so much money on saddles and other stuff in the Hermes store that it would make your head spin too. I know a guy that has this collection of watches. I'll just keep it running on the screen while I keep talking. The profitability of him as a watch customer at Rolex or some other brand 1AD offsets 10 or 50 or 100 single watch buyers due to the sheer volume of his business. Watches and Wonders for Patek functions less as a trade show and more as a first invite for whale customers. If you spend enough cash at Patek, you get invited to the brand to see the new launches firsthand, and you bring your American Express Platinum card with you. So when you think of some brands, you have to think of whale customers. Brands like AP, Patek, Moser, sure, they sell single watches to single clients, but they have a meaningful set of whales, and they cater to these kinds of loyal repeat customers because they are stable, they are predictable, they are repeat business, and they are very, very profitable. So Thierry might sell me an entry-level Calatrava, but until I can show an Excel sheet that demonstrates a willingness to spend an obscene amount of money in his store, I'm not getting access to the really cool stuff. Then there's add-ons or the upsell. Rolex would be perfectly happy to sell a lot of people a Submariner. But do you know what they want even more? Somebody to buy a Daytona in yellow gold on an Oyster Flex. Also, I know everybody, including myself, wants a steel Daytona. It's available in 2 dials, but where do I get the real variety? I get it in gold. The number of dials I can choose from there is almost endless. That's the upsell. Give more options to people that have more money. JLC will happily take your money for a reverso. They want that business. But what do they want even more? They want the customer that pays for the full gold master control ultra thin perpetual calendar. Zenith? They will sell regular people, regular, broadly speaking, a $13,900 triple calendar Chronomaster. But for collectors, they'll charge $8,000 more for the exact same watch with a lapis lazuli dial. I would bet that it's almost $7,000 in extra profit. Omega will sell you a good 300M for $7,300. But there's a guy out there that's willing to pay $9,400 for the exact same watch with a James Bond logo on the back. IWC, their Pilot Mark 20 costs the same today as it did when I bought it 2 years ago. But the Ceratanium model, 16% more expensive compared to when I considered it for the first time a couple of years back. That's in part down to materials, but it's also down to the upsell. The Ingenieur is essentially the upsell. It's more expensive to make, but when it was released, it was priced at about $12,000, double that of a Pilot Mark 20. They didn't raise the price of the Ingenieur. They introduced it at a much higher price point. The same goes for the Ground Scrounger from Rolex. It's priced like a premium two-tone Datejust with a fluted bezel. There's no steel option. All those watches, the James Bond 007 Seamaster, the Ground Scrounger, the Ceratanium Pilot Chrono, the Zenith Lapis Lazuli, they are all upsells. They are positioned at a much higher point and they are aimed at much more spend-happy customers. I mean, heck, even Christopher Ward do this. They'll happily sell a lot of Trident divers for $1,300. But the Christopher Ward Loco has a per-watch profitability in real dollars that is much higher. The volumes aren't the same, but those upsell products really generate cash. The thing I'm trying to get across is that in the eyes of the watch brands, not all customers are made equal. There are customers that just want a good watch. And then there are customers that are open to the upsell. And the upsell customers are much more profitable as a group, so brands are catering to them more and more. What you're seeing, as far as I can tell, is essentially 3 strategies unfolding. They are the brands that cater to the ultra high-end whale segment. They are the brands that ensure that there are options for the public, but they push the upsell. And they are brands that aim fully for the value space. And these 3 groups track almost perfectly to the absolute high-end, the mid-luxury space, and the entry to value space. The absolute high-end, it's brands that have entry options that start at $15,000 to $20,000 or more. It's Chapek, it's Patek, it's Moser, it's Ulysse Nardin, it's a ton of others. And on my data, these are the brands that have upped prices the most. Why? Because they are catering to that top 10% or top 1% who've gotten so much richer than you or me. They can afford it, and whether a watch is $30,000 or $40,000 makes no difference to them financially. To them, it's an extra shot of espresso in their latte. Financially, it means nothing. Second, they cater massively to whales. Watches and Wonders for Patek, it's by invitation only and it's for high rollers only. Thierry Stone said as much. He doesn't care about people that can't afford his products. These brands in this space exclusively cater to rich people for whom the price point is irrelevant, and there is a massive concentration of whale customers which they can make a lot of money on. And then you've got the value space. For me, that's brands that start below $3,000. Christopher Ward, Longines, Tudor at the high end, maybe Tissot, Baltic, Furlamari, Chinese factory brands, million others. What's happening there? This isn't a space with a ton of whale customers. It isn't a space where customers are necessarily open to the pointless upsell. They're not falling for an $8,000 extra lapis lazuli dial. So in this space, you're seeing value as the key proposition. These brands are seeing a lot of interest, and they are siphoning off some of the entry, sort of lower mid-luxury brand customers. And then there's the mid-luxury space. This is for brands that have entry watches from $4,000 to $5,000 and up. It's IWC, it's Rolex, it's Breitling, it's JLC, it's Omega. And what's happening there? Well, they're not lowering prices. Let's be real, that's never going to happen. They believe that would devalue their brand, and they're probably not convinced that any pickup in volumes would offset the lower prices. So what do? A few, but not all, go the price increase route, believing that their product has a quality that can keep pulling in customers at a higher price point. It's not all of them, but it is Omega, it is JLC. But they're not all doing it, because for some, the drop-off in customers is not offset by an increased profit on a per customer level. But all of them, though, seem to be trying the upsell. They expand their emphasis on upsell products. For IWC, it's the Ingenua and the Seratanium Pilots and the Gold Ingenuas. For Rolex, it's the two-tone models, the Oysterflex Gold models. For Omega, it's the Speedy 321s and the two-tone Speedies and the James Bond 300Ms. Or a $9,500 Planet Ocean over a 300M. There aren't as many customers, but the per customer profit on these upsells is way higher, and it's driving a higher average per watch buy price. It's not about making the entry-level products more expensive. It's about making the upsell products more compelling and making them more profitable. These brands will take your money if you can afford them, but you're likely less and less their priority. Their revenue and profit generation won't always follow a product pyramid anymore, with lots of options and lots of customers in the bottom and then progressively fewer and fewer. What I think they're looking for is a thicker middle and upper end. And does it matter that some of those entry watches end up at 25 to 30% off on the secondary market? No, not really. Because over time, they'll manage that by lowering production volumes to match demand. Because Nico is only partially correct when he says the secondary market is an accurate reflection of the value of your watch. It is assuming the current supply. Lower the supply at the retail level and the secondary market price goes up. The whole reason everybody had a meltdown over JLC's prices was because it was the lower end products that went up in price too much. I've got zero doubt that it hurt them, but nobody would have batted an eyelid if they had just increased pricing on their duometers and gold complication watches. It's all about the upsell. And if you're Patek, you're interested in the top 1% and the whale customers. These are also the people that are willing to buy a Taylor Swift ticket on StubHub for $9,000 and buy FIFA World Cup tickets for $10,000. For me, the sad truth is this. In the Western world, there is a small group of incredibly rich people that are just getting richer and richer. The rest of us are just kind of trying to stay in place. And the harsh reality is not that brands like IWC, Rolex, and Breitling are trying to fleece us. They are just adjusting for inflation right now, and they care more about upsells and whales. For me, it's a little bit sad that fewer people can experience the beauty of even a relatively simple watch like an Omega Aquaterra, but that's the way things are going these days. The good news, like I said, you can get really good watches from great brands for under $3,000. Sure, not all of them have the status effect of Omega or Rolex, but the pure quality gap is getting narrower every day. Don't lie to yourself and don't say that they're the same as those luxury brands. They're not, but you get really, really close. So send your money where you can get a good watch. Let the money you do have do the talking. These brands do listen, believe me, they do. Those were my thoughts. Share yours in the comments. Like, subscribe. Cheers.